Okay, well, yeah, welcome everyone to today's briefings, and I'll ask Councillor Robinson to do the karakia.
Haki waho, kia tau te mori e kokiri nai. I ngā piki me ngā hiki, ko te rangi mare, tāku I rapu nei, tihei mori ora.
Thanks for that, Genevieve. Well, we've got a presentation now on public transport, so maybe we just keep questions to the end. Is that what you want to do, Stuart?
What we're going to do is go through segments of the discussion and then pause for questions as we go through it.
Okay, okay. I'm happy with that. I'll hand it over to you and your team. Maybe if you could just do some introductions.
Sure. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Hopefully you know me. I'm Stuart, GM of Public Transport. I have Stephanie Sims. She's our Senior Community Engagement Advisor in the PT team. We've got Mark here, who is our Principal Planner for Public Transport. And most of you will know Sonia is our Strategy and Planning Manager for PT. So I've got the A team up here today to talk to you about this topic. Look, this conversation is really about opportunity. Opportunity to shape our urban space, an opportunity to respond to the growth that's going on in Greater Christchurch at the moment, and an opportunity to really support both economic and community outcomes over the next 10 to 20 years. And so what this piece of work is going to do, that the team are going to talk to you about, is ultimately provide a compelling investment case for public transport in Aotearoa Greater Christchurch. However, that comes with trade-offs, as we've talked about before, and the need for prioritisation, because there's only so much money in the system, only so many buses we can use, and so there's tension in the system, which we've talked about before. There's tension with government policy, there's tension with community aspirations, tension with money, and with how fast the city is going to grow and shape itself. So what we're going to do is a full network service review, supporting the PT Future Investment Program. And that is a very resource-intensive task for us. We haven't done a full network review for quite a number of years. So we need to do this right. We need to do it well. We need to make sure we listen to and hear the community voice. But we also need to make sure that we use evidence to support an investment case. Because NZTA, Waka Kotahi and the government are very, very interested in evidence, so that when they invest their money, they want to know they're getting good value out of that investment. And so too do you as governors for our rates. So what you're going to hear today, some of you will have already heard some of this, but we want to recap because it tells quite a story. We're going to talk to you about the approach we're going to take. We're going to talk to you about the timelines for this piece of work, and we're going to talk to you about your input into this process, because we do need your input and contribution. One of the key fundamental underlying aspects of this piece of work, it is a collaboration across Greater Christchurch, across the partners, Christchurch City Council, Waimakariri, Selwyn District, and Waka Kotahi, NZTA, and ourselves. So this piece of work is not just our piece of work. Selwyn, Waimakariri, and Selwyn are involved, and Stephanie's going to talk about that. We need your involvement at a governance layer across those partners, and the intention behind that is to be able to present a single voice to government to support the investment. So it is really, really important. So I'm going to hand over to Sonia now, and she'll start off the conversation.
Okay, so just as a quick recap, so we're not going to go into slides 6 and 9, but there's more detail in there. But essentially, we've just recently completed a strategic refresh. So we've looked at what's changed in the strategic context. So since PT Futures was approved in 2020, essentially we've had 15 either changes to documents or new documents that have come in. So that's a lot in terms of kind of the environment that we're in, but it's really, really strengthened. The PT Futures is really the cornerstone of kind of transport and land use planning and where we need to go. Some of the things that have changed from a national perspective, we've had some amendments from the LTMA, and that's kind of strengthened the role that we play as a PTA. And also private revenue ratio has come in, so we've discussed that quite a lot. So obviously that has an impact on what we look to do from a 10-year investment programme. Recently, the National Infrastructure Plan came out, so that was in February, and that includes PT Futures. It's called Bus Network Improvements, and it includes MRT, which is a really, really fantastic news for us to see that in that plan and recognised at that level. In terms of the alignment with, we've looked at national plans, we've looked at regional plans, we've looked at sub-regional strategies. It's really strengthened the case for investment within public transport. So the environment is kind of all pointing to this is critical and we need this investment now more than ever. Particularly from a sub-regional perspective, we now have the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, which really kind of strengthens the work that we're doing in this space. And we've also got the Regional Public Transport Plan, which again reflects the plan that we're trying to do and implement the improvements that we're trying to do here. Those have all gone through consultation. We've got a lot of support. So I guess we've really got kind of that community support and buy-in to do more in this space. So we really, really want to set ourselves up in the best possible place and really advocate for our communities. I'll just kind of, is there any other questions or areas of commentary for the strategic context before we move on?
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Just going back to the the review and about the comment with the partners there. Who is paying for this? Is it an integrated commitment where the partners all pay together? And I'm thinking with the issues that there are in relation to the Christchurch Council, and at times the lack of commitment to partnerships. So is that there?
So the PT Futures work program consists of a number of building blocks, and Christchurch City Council and Canterbury Regional Council are the primary providers of those building blocks, and Waimakariri and Selwyn are also contributing in relation to their network use, if you like. This particular piece of work and Public Transport Network Service Review is fully funded by Canterbury Regional Council. Christchurch City Council are doing their own infrastructure investment case, and they are funding the work related to that. And then as a partnership, we have all contributed to this point in time in terms of the original program business case that was approved 6 years ago. CCC are also contributing a lot of resource to the process, and Stephanie will be talking about our engagement and collaboration with them. But in terms of the hard cash that's paying for the network service review that we're talking about, that's us.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really a good introduction about where we're at, and it's good to hear some of those key words being mentioned. Greater Christchurch partnership commitment to this. The infrastructure, obviously, strategy involving futures, PT Futures, uplift, and also MRT, with the end goal of MRT. Much of what you're talking about is service and how we provide a better service. And I'm just wondering whether there's room somewhere when we get down to the sharper end of this about looking at the thing that we need to talk to central government about, which is the investment case for this, because it's about the dollar you spend today is cheaper than one you're going to spend 10 years. And so I was just wondering, is there any economic analysis? Are we going to get an economist involved in this? You are. That's good. Thank you. That's great, Sonia.
Make a quick
Councillor.
comment. So yeah, essentially, as part of the investment case process, that's going to be really critical around that kind of economic case, that investment case, to make sure that it stacks up in terms of the staging of the programme. But Mark will talk to that more when we get into the PT Futures update.
Because I think that is the thing that will tick a minister's box. When we've talked to these ministers about this, they're really keen on that investment case, and the reasoning behind why we need to do that is that you don't want to backfill this thing, because if you backfill it, it costs you twice as much. You can see what's going on in Auckland.
Yeah, so we've got a slide coming kind of more towards the end of the presentation where we talk about some key messages for central government. So one of the things we'd really like to see, ideally, is that we get into the GPS. So that'll be coming out soon in terms of that new draft. So if we see ourselves in there, that kind of opens up the potential. We'll have a really good investment case backing us up, and we've got the skills and the knowledge and the examples where we know once we've got funding, we can do this. So there's real confidence that we can deliver.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mackay.
Just going back to Councillor Faulkner's question around the who's paying, but and Stuart, you've just said that we are paying for the network review. When you talk about we're talking. Am I correct in assuming that that's the targeted PT collections from across the Greater Christchurch area and prorated somehow?
Yeah, that's correct. So in the annual plan, this year's annual plan, Council approved money to do this piece of work, and that's being funded out of reserves. And that's obviously being collected through those targeted rates, yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gerard, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Me. Sorry.
If there's no more questions, I'll let you carry on.
Kia ora. So we're going to take, if it's okay, we'll take the next few slides as read, but I'll just summarise the PT Futures investment case and what's come before that we've just been really talking about. And that was an indicative business case that was approved by all partners in 2020. It covers both services and infrastructure. And it was a programme developed on delivering high frequency, reliability, safety and attractive services that connect people to key activity centres and growth areas and support land use intensification. So, perfect. It's a staged investment programme focused on maximising opportunity, and it lays the foundations for mass rapid transit. And I'm going to touch more on the staging later and how we're going to move forward on that basis. Just a little bit of background, moving between what's called an indicative business case to implementation requires a smaller detailed level investment case. So it's essentially a deeper dive into the costs and benefits of an individual intervention, for example, Route 7. So we'll be talking about an investment pathway process. It's iterative detail, and the whole methodology that we're working towards is basically required by the Treasury, and everything we're going to be doing is geared towards getting NZTA co-funding. So that evidence base we were talking about a minute ago, that is all important in our thinking. The pack defines the Greater Christchurch boundary, so it's pertinent to point out that service requests outside of this boundary will be considered through a separate strategic framework, which is under development. So were there any questions on the previous programme before we move on to talk about how things are changing? No? Cool.
Councillor Faulkner.
Excuse me, I'm just having a slow day today. Going back to the business case study, what's the timeline for completion?
So we'll come to that. Spoiler alert, it's probably about 18 months. But yeah.
So sorry, just to clarify, we're aiming for, obviously, through the long-term plan, we need to agree the local share portion. So that's kind of driving our timelines. the timelines for the NLTP differ to our timelines from a long-term plan perspective. So we're kind of having to look to make sure that we put ourselves in the best position. Essentially, we need to agree the funding that we require through the NLTP earlier than the long-term plan, which has always been a real challenge.
Thank you for that. Have you got a question, Councillor
Yeah,
McKay?
look, sorry, I haven't got I've left my laptop on my table at home. But I had picked up that you're talking about the Greater Christchurch area in this map. My understanding is currently PT's charged basically based on the urban boundaries. So is part of the discussion or thinking to actually start charging people within these green areas, for example, the same as within the urban boundaries? I mean, is this going to be one of the ultimate things? I mean, why put this map in here, I guess is what I'm asking. What's the significance of this map coming in here?
It's a very good question, Councillor Kai. So the significance of this map relates to how our current PT network is designed, delivered and funded, as you point out. So we have targeted rate for public transport, and in the Greater Christchurch context, that is divided into two different types of targeted rate: an urban targeted rate and a rural targeted rate. And so obviously the rural folk are charged less, but the reason that is done is because those in the urban centres get greater benefit and greater opportunity to access and utilise our public transport network. In the rural sense, particularly in Selwyn and Waimakariri, there is opportunity to access our PT network through park and ride type facilities, but also those folk in Greater Christchurch who are in the rural space inside this map have secondary benefits from public transport, cleaner air, all those sorts of things. So that is why there is two different types of targeted rate. Once you're outside that green line, those folk outside of that Greater Christchurch boundary don't contribute to the Greater Christchurch public transport network at all, because it's deemed that they don't really have sufficient access or sufficient benefit from it. Does that help?
No, because it's I'm outside that green line and I pay my, what is it going to be, $30 this year or thereabouts, $28. So, and people in Oxford, they are persistently complaining about paying $29 or currently at the moment, and say they've got no bus service. So that this is really odd, because this is suggesting to me that somebody at Mandeville or Swananoa is paying the urban rate, and I don't believe that to be the case.
So those communities might be contributing to the North Canterbury Vehicle Trust targeted rate.
Well, then I do need to have some more questions with some staff in the transport team, because I've raised this before. Because it went up, it did go up quite a bit when we actually brought the direct services in, the park and ride, and I have no problem with that at all. I think that's a really good system, and happy to pay. But it is the bane of my life. Probably the thing I get the most complaints about when the rates bills goes out is, why am I paying public transport when I don't have public transport, even if it's only $29? Because in Waimakariri, ours is a standard set fees for urban and rural. So that's why I'm digging into asking around these boundaries. And then, of course, we've got another rate that we collect for Greater Christchurch and urban development, which I also understand has got a transport component in it, which all of Waimakariri pays for as well. So
yeah, that will be the Canterbury regional transport component, is probably, I would say. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind. I can do it offline, but wouldn't mind just finding out a little bit more around that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Councillor McKay. Councillor Davis.
Just a quick question, Mark. So the 18 months that this will take, is that in line with the GPS announcement in 27 in July? When do they announce their money?
We haven't got a date when they're going to kind of announce the GPS when it's finalised. It should be coming out in the next couple of months, the draft. Then they'll create the final. And what we're expecting to see in this GPS is projects kind of outlined, and we're really hopeful that PT Futures will be in there, and obviously with the MRT. Then that gets translated into the National Land Transport Programme. So that's where we have to put through our full funding bid, and we need to get that in by December this year. And then obviously we'll need to go through our process to agree our local share through the long-term plan early 2027. So there is a bit of misalignment in terms of we don't get the full confirmation of the NLTP until September 2027 after we've already struck the rates, which is a real challenge for us. Yeah. No.
Councillor Robinson.
Just going back to sort of Claire's discussion, it just reminded me of the EV replacement element and the clean air targets and things like that. How, knowing that we're not doing really the EV uplift the same as we had anticipated, does that change the target rate for those who assumed that they would benefit from the EV uplift?
I wouldn't think so. If we're not spending the money, then we're not going to rate for it. But obviously we're spending money on our current EV fleet, which is producing emissions benefits. So we're still going to collect rates to pay for that.
The target for the Greater Christchurch area, though, part of that, the assumption was that, you know, I know we can't do it because of other outside sources, but I guess I'm not sure that the targeted rate comes with a full expectation of what the public assumed that they would be delivering on. And so I'm just wondering if that element needs to be revisited to at least say, look, we haven't been able to do this bit, so we need to adjust the target rate. I don't know. It just feels the secondary element of cleaner air, and that's a benefit. Yes, it is, but only if we've got the EVs going in the urban environment. I know we've picked the right, yeah, I don't know. I might have to tease that out in a separate part, but...
I might be able to just add something for staff and with Genevieve, and I think that part of that discussion was when we talked about removing vehicles off the road for the free, when we were discussing free fares and where we ultimately got to and subsidise low fares, and that was part of the discussion to try and justify some stuff was around reducing emissions, because I can remember lots of papers coming back with different tonnages and stuff on. But I think the most important thing, Genevieve, was fares and getting vehicles off the road. So rather than actually lower emissions from the buses.
Okay, team, we'll carry on.
Thank you. I'll now talk about what's changed. I'll start with one thing that hasn't changed, and that is that PT Futures remains the programme of choice for this region. It is a key move to unlock the broader strategic vision which has been set out in our spatial strategy. All of the evidence is pointing to this being the right thing to do for Greater Christchurch. However, we do face challenges. So we have growth, and the nature of growth is changing. It is accelerating. So last year, Greater Christchurch grew at 1.1%, the fastest of any region in New Zealand. Growth in both population and traffic is greater than was forecast in 2020 through the original PT Futures programme. And we're also seeing that growth taking the form of increased intensification. So we're seeing multi-unit development everywhere. And a lot of this growth is happening where we have core routes. So now we are seeing congestion and overcrowding on our core routes. And growth is really outpacing intervention at the moment, and it's starting to seriously affect how we can move around our city. So as we have a road network that is approaching saturation in places, every additional car has an exponential impact on delay. So the impacts on our transport system are accelerating, and TomTom currently has us down as the most congested city in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, how's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the slowest average speeds, worse than Auckland, apparently. So that is quite compelling, isn't it? And PT growth has been rapid post-COVID, and you know that we've been growing at 15% a year. So we've had explosive growth on our network. But as we'll see later, that growth is starting to slow, and the ability for us to operate an efficient service is really under threat, and we need to respond to that. So here's a growth in numbers. So as I said, growth and intensification pressures of population and traffic are accelerating faster than forecast. We're currently, this is 50,000 a decade there. That is the long-term trend. At the moment, it's closer to 76,000 based on last year. That's how many additional people are moving here every 10 years. So intensification and growth is not something we think about in the future. It's something that's happening now. We're on that trajectory, and we do need to respond to it. And it's occurring across the whole region as well. So it's not just Christchurch City, it's occurring in Selwyn, it's occurring in Waimakariri, and it's placing pressures across the whole transportation system. And we're also approaching an inflection in growth. So as I keep saying, acceleration, and that is most manifest if we look around the city. We've got Te Kaha, we've got Parakiore, and we've also got places like the North Hallswell Key Activity Centre down the road, which will generate 30,000 square metres of retail floor space. So we are growing, and we need to respond to that. And if we go to the next slide, thank you, we got growth in pictures. So I don't think I need to say too much about this, other than we can just sit there and admire it, because, wow, look at that.
It's a visual, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's quite a compelling story, isn't it? So we've got entire neighbourhoods that just didn't exist 20 years ago. And Steph's going to have some interesting things to say around what our community are saying about this area and the growth. And if I move on to slide 20, I can really show you that pipeline that I've been talking about. So this is really amazing, I think, in some ways. If you think back 10 years ago, we just kept seeing greenfield expansion and we thought it would never end. But here we are, we're actually seeing the majority of housing consents being multi-unit. So we are actually intensifying. And again, this intensification is happening on top of our core services. So we need to strengthen and expand our PT system to accommodate that.
Is that graph that you've just showed, is that across the Greater Christchurch or just Christchurch City?
Sorry, that is just Christchurch City. It's a great question, yes.
Just Councillor Campbell, did you have a question?
And you may cover this. When PT Futures came out, it really focused on west, central, north, which was where the high growth areas were seen. Since then, we've had significant zoning changes. And so, for example, around where I live, which is within about 800 metres of Eastgate, there is a massive explosion in growth, and it will get more because up to 6 stories, 600 metres around is going to be allowed. So as an advocate for the East and particularly of that inner east area where the growth is explosive. Is PT Futures being revisited in line with that growth?
This is exactly why we need to refresh our programmes. So we have Plan Change 14 and other changes, and we really need to match our investment to those growth areas. So yes, definitely.
Thanks for that. Councillor Moody, did you have a question?
Yep. That one about Auckland and us being worse. It's very useful for political soundbite, and I really struggle to get my head around it. I mean, you never hear that ever. It's always, well, Auckland, people move to Christchurch. The mayor's always saying to get away from the traffic jams of Auckland, the 1 to 2 hour commutes. When I've lived there, but the devil's in the detail. You said that it's that the slowness. We're slower because they might take 2 hours because they're big and they've got to come in a long way from out of. But we're just so compact. Is it?
Absolutely. No, I hear you. I was in Auckland last July and I was pleased to get up to 15 kilometres an hour on the motorway. Honestly, it was awful. But there is, I have met with some people who analyse this data. They do also have a bigger transport system than we do. So if you do drive, the last time I tried to drive home from Christchurch, I know relying on personal experience is never the best way, but it did take me an hour to get out of the central city to Hillmorton, which is quite a long time. And look, we do have, we've got higher densities and we have 20-metre wide corridors. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I just think we have a more intense inner system than Auckland does. Auckland also has rail. They have double-decker buses. They've got a lot more capacity to move. So
the quota is at slowest.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's right. It's how long it takes to travel 20 minutes. It's average speeds in the network, and we do come out slower.
Sorry, just a quick one. Yeah, we're happy to share the report with you because it's actually really interesting. And Tom produced some excellent visuals and some sound bites. I guess kind of what it's showing for us is the problem is now. It's not something that we need to plan for in the future. This is investment that we need now to do that mode shift, because if not, we're going to see these problems just grow. And we changed, I think we were 4th and we've moved to number 1 from a New Zealand city congestion. That is not where we want to be. That is not a good news story, but it supports the need for this investment here within public transport to get that mode shift and that patronage change. Mm-hmm. So happy to share. It's a really interesting report.
Oh, we look forward to that. To Councillor Robinson, do you have a question?
I'm looking forward to that too, because I know you're doing a whole review, and there's more detail actually you're talking about that I'm pleased you're looking at, considering that we've got a lot of concrete buildings in the middle of the city, all congested with lots of traffic, and I'm looking at the sort of island effect of the heat as well without the green spaces. So all of this together gives a better even push for greater public transport in these heavy, dense urban. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Well, it's very noticeable. Nick and I travel up and down the main road, and obviously coming in. So we come in on Tuesday night. We came in hit town about what time was it? About 4:30 probably, and it took 20 minutes probably. But I didn't think that was a great build up of. There was a great build up of car, but it didn't take long. It flowed pretty well. But I think that we're seeing on our drive, we're seeing more freight. We're seeing bigger trucks, and, so there's no gaps in traffic anymore, and a lot of tourists, like shitloads of tourists and vans, and that's the congestion. The congestion is even all the way down to our way, and I think that then just, it wasn't like this 3 years ago, which is interesting.
A 3-hour trip from Twizel now takes 3.5 hours.
Yeah, mine's another half hour from Timaru.
I mean, we are in peak, probably freight season and peak tourist season. Roadworks. Yeah. Councillor Faulkner, did you have a question?
I do. It's on there. I think it's on the next slide where you say without sustained and significant investment in PT, etc., etc., etc. And the thing that comes to my mind, being grey-haired and watching New Zealand deal with public transport, you kind of shake your head and go, for goodness sake, we just can't get it together. Now, we can do a report, and are we going to be able to get something across the line? Is there confidence that we can put something together?
Absolutely. So everything we're talking about here is going into our evidence base as part of that Treasury methodology. So the fact that we do have this tension between land use and transport system, this poor network performance, that's going to be the backbone of our investment case. So it's our job to really maximise and make sure these problems really come through that case. I mean, we've also got the highest amount of parking per capita in the central city. All of these things are contributing factors. So yes, absolutely, we're committed to doing that. And I'll probably come on to that in a bit in terms of how we're going to approach this. We'll talk about that shortly. If I may, because I know we're a little pressed for time, please, Mr. Chair, if I may continue. It's about travel choice. That's what we need. So we talk about car dependency. We have the highest levels of car ownership. So it's not about getting everybody to sell their cars and start using PT all the time. It's about having choice. And this map is quite compelling because it shows those areas of the city where that choice doesn't exist at the moment. And we've broken that down in residential and industrial. There's sort of the teal colour represents the catchment, if you like. So this is quite a simplified. It doesn't take account of things like frequency. So for higher frequency services, for example, the catchments would be bigger. So we've got different tools in the toolbox for addressing this. But this is a powerful graphic that just shows where we are now, the extent of the problem and what we're looking to address.
Can I just add into that, just reflecting on your question before? So we will produce, as Mark said, a compelling evidence-based investment case for investment in public transport in Greater Christchurch. But inevitably, as any funder does, they will have to prioritise their funding. And that is why we consistently hear from government is they want us to prioritise on our core corridors because that's where the most impact will be felt and we can move the most people. And that diagram up there sort of highlights that for us, so the previous one you had, that there's lots of pockets in our community that don't have good access to PT right now. And so we probably won't be able to service all of them all at once. So then the question becomes for us is how do we prioritise those communities? How do we trade off one community versus another, given the likely reality that there will be a limited bucket of money for us to use, either our money from rates or the government's money through the NLTF. And that's the same filter that government will be going through when we put our business case to them, or when the GPS comes out and the government allocates buckets of money to roads or public transport or safety or whatever. They'll have to cut their cloth just as we will.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Gerard, did you have a question?
Slightly out of context now. My question was around, I'm really for MRT, but, in the short term, to address the urgency of our congestion, we've got private companies that are looking at rail, and I'm just wondering how we can possibly work more with Kiwi Rail. I mean, that obviously NTA is a partner, but is Kiwi Rail, and is there any scope to work in with the existing corridors that we've already got as far as the potential there. It's just like, I know with roading and that sort of thing, I've worked in roading and it takes years for land designation and that sort of thing. It's a long time, lead-in time. So these things, where we already have got rail corridors in place. So, is there any scope? Thank you.
So this organisation, along with the Greater Christchurch partners, have looked into rail many times over the last 20 plus years. And in fact, I can probably point to 3 separate studies on rail investigations for passenger transport for Aotearoa and for Canterbury the last sort of 12 years. And in each case, the conclusion that was come to was that for our particular city, that wasn't there wasn't a strong investment case for it. Today, KiwiRail are not prioritised or focused on public transport. They're focused on freight. That's what the government wants them to focus on. That's what they're funded to do. They're happy to talk, and people from Canterbury Regional Council have had many conversations with KiwiRail. But that's why folks like Mainland Rail have popped up, because KiwiRail's just not in that game. And so Mainland are trying to fill that gap. And as we know, the rail corridor is physically there, but the infrastructure is not there to support passenger rail reliably at the moment. And that's been the historical barrier that the previous reports have talked about. And if we think about the work that the partnership have done for MRT, you can read the strategic investment case for that, which came out circa 18 months ago. It contemplated rail as one of the options, and it too discounted heavy rail for passenger transport for Greater Christchurch. So there has been lots and lots of studies into it, and so it doesn't form part of this piece of work. Yeah.
Thanks, Stuart, for that. Councillor Faulkner, did you have a question?
Yeah, just looking at that service map and the industrial areas, can you just clarify for me, are those areas high labour concentrated areas? Is there a high workforce within those areas? Because I'm just looking at the service maps and they seem to run to the edges but not actually into it.
Some of them, yes. So, for example, the Sockburn and South Hornby areas we know are currently underserved. And there's also the emerging airport business park, which is going to be massive. I think we're looking at another 30,000 jobs or in that magnitude up there. And then in the southeast as well.
So as part of our network review, this is kind of just a really high-level indicative picture. So we know that there's many areas across the city where essentially we've got growth and we're not able to service them well with the current network. So when we do our network review, we'll really look into where is these areas of growth, where do we have these areas of opportunity, and be able to pull that information through when we start developing the 10-year programme of improvements.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, just looking at that, I mean, for choices, I mean, I live in Sumner and I'm an able-bodied human, so I can walk, I can bike, I can bus, I can drive. The bike is the fastest way to get to the city. And so I know people who live in Sumner whose teenage kids, both of them drive to school in separate cars. And I'm wondering if there's a way we present the business case that a multimodal multimodal is part of it, and part of that is a mental health, take that strain off that system of which is also funded by the government. Is there any place to put health into this business case?
So there's two ways to look at issues like health. There's alignment with policy, but there's also technical as well. So when we look at the economic evaluation of this program, that would capture the health benefits of additional walking. So that would be internalized. I might just cover off the next slide. Oh, it's not. There we go. So in conclusion to this part, I think we all agree the time to invest is now. You can see a picture for the past 25 years. In patronage, there's clearly a dip after the earthquakes and the impacts of that, and we know that the investment following the earthquakes was lower for Greater Christchurch than Greater Wellington and Auckland, and pre-earthquake patronage didn't recover. And then we had COVID. We can see another fall away. And since COVID, as we say, we've had a 15% explosive growth in demand. This has been fueled in part by population growth. But investment, although we've done some great things, which we will talk about, investment hasn't kept up with this growth in demand. And now we're reaching this point, potentially this turning point, where the growth is starting to decrease. So we need to, what was the term from COVID? Turn the curve, or not flatten the curve. We need to do the opposite of that. We need to get this growth back up again. So this is really our compelling case for change, that we need to get investment to match our growth. And that will take us, if we do that, we will be looking at the original PT Futures forecast of 18 million riders by 2028. And I don't see why we can't achieve that. So I'm going to hand over, unless there's any further questions. I might hand over to Steph to talk about.
I just got one question.
This chair.
So you talk about 15 million, boardings a year, but what percentage of the population make up that number of boardings? Because I've read an interest in the paper about a year ago that we have more car parks in Christchurch than any other city in New Zealand. So and it's very, very competitive. So the pricing of car parking is getting cheaper. So how are we going to negate that to get more people travelling on buses every day?
Yeah, so there's two ways to answer that question. Firstly, our mode share, although we've had this growth, our mode share is typically still around 2%. So it is quite disappointing. But another way to look at it is that 30% of residents have used the system at least once. I think it's per month or
Over the past 12 months.
Over the past 12 months, thank you. So that's, although, the overall mode share target is disappointing, but we have an opportunity to increase loyalty. So, yeah.
Councillor Moody.
Thank you. This is a great sort of overview for someone, not from a public transport background. So just a couple more general questions. It seems like this is a good workshop to be having the general questions, right? I'm in the right place. Because we're not deciding and we're not recorded and yada. So you talked about trains and how they don't stack up financially. It was really interesting to hear, because I'd always just thought, oh well, it's just because we don't have trains, that's half the problem. Is there something else that came out of those studies, like buses and, like I hear talks about sort of trammy, flexy buses that are joined together? Is it, because it can't just be buses, can it? They're so uncool. That's why no one wants to be on a bus, It's 2%. I mean, it's just not going to change the world with a bus alone.
This is kind of a regional council.
So the mass rapid transit indicative business case. It doesn't specify, we haven't yet made a choice on mode. So that would be either bus rapid transit or light rail between Belfast, Central City, Hornby. And the beauty of that study is we have matching spatial plan as well, which will target growth to that corridor. So yeah, it would be, I don't know what mode it'll take. The mode decision's being delayed, deferred, so we can take advantage of the technology that's available at that time. So there's been lots of talk about trackless trams, etc. But yeah, we'll talk about the staging piece in a bit, because we have to start with strengthening the bus fleet and then moving into new and exciting things from there.
Right, so there might be other modes. We're still thinking about it. And then, I mean, the obvious one, if you want people out of cars and onto a bus, understand that in Auckland there, I hear this on the radio, congestion charging. You charge people. You don't say, it's nicer to go on the bus. You say, it's more expensive to take your car at rush hour. You know, it's still up to you. Drive if you want, but you might just want to hop on the bus to save yourself the $7 each way. Is that in part of our, discussions with central government and all the rest?
Look, I'll take a crack at that one. The ability to do congestion charging, or in the past they've had a fuel tax. Auckland have done that in the past, is determined by central government. So we can't unilaterally make that decision ourselves as a region. It has to be approved by central government. So that is a conversation that, as a cohort, Greater Christchurch could choose to have with central government. But obviously there would need to be a decent amount of research and thought into that. Just on the question of modes, one of the things that's really important to think about in the New Zealand context, and you would have seen this unfold in Auckland with City Rail Link and other projects that were mooted but didn't get off the ground, is each mode comes with a consequence and a cost footprint. And so balancing the value for money aspect is really, really important. And if we think about New Zealand, because we are fundamentally behind the eight ball in terms of public transport service and delivery nationally, we have to contend with an existing built environment. And so, as Councillor Scott mentioned before, retrofitting new modes into a built environment is inherently expensive. And that is why what's the right word I'm going to use? I'm not going to use a word. The bus is the preferred mode in our country because it is the most flexible and most cost-effective mode for our built environment.
Councillor Lamont.
I love this conversation. It's my absolute favourite. Thank you so much, guys. I was just sitting back enjoying it and sort of letting it wash over me, but the questions now keep coming. Can you just, I've got sort of three parts to this question, if you'll just give me pause. Can you just delve a little bit more into the international evidential sort of trends we see with technological and behavioural change? 10 years from now, the world will be very different. And what are we seeing in terms of change and uptick in terms of the public transport space internationally that can help guide some good decision making? That's the first part.
That's an amazing question. So the ability to have foresight. So we're just completing a concept regional land transport plan at the moment. Part of the methodology in that, we have had a futurist come and join us. And that involves bringing all of the experts together and talking about these parameters like, how are the attitudes of young people changing, for example? We've got high numbers of concession fares at the moment, will they stay loyal to the system as they grow up, or will they all become car dependent? So these conversations have been taking place, and one of the things we're going to do through our network review is we're also asking these questions. So because we know we're going to need to innovate along the way, we're going to need to do things slightly differently, and we're going to take in these questions. How are things changing in the world, and what foresight should we have? So I left my crystal ball at home, I'm sorry, but
Sorry, that was a mean question, wasn't it? Sorry. Second part is really just a comment. I too love trains, but absolutely that's more of a national conversation in terms of infrastructural ability, and we're seeing change and flux in that space in Wellington at the moment. So nice to have, absolutely incredibly expensive to implement in a established environment. So I'd absolutely take that on board. What I'm also interested in is our collaborative partners. How are they feeling? And I almost feel like there's a need to develop our strategy increasingly together. And how much can we be the benevolent dictator when our future in the public transport space within the regional council will be very different.
We'll just argue between ourselves. I think we've got all the strategic pieces of the puzzle that we need here. Like through the Greater Christchurch Partnership, we've got an agreed spatial plan, we've got an agreed work programme, how we're all going to implement that and work together. We've got that agreement from all partner agencies that we're really trying to push as hard as we can with delivery of PT Futures from both a services and infrastructure perspective, because we know we're going to get greater benefits when we do this together. We've also got a transport plan as well for Greater Christchurch. So I think we've got all the pieces there. What we're looking to kind of prove here is that we've got the investment case, we've got the economics, we meet what government is trying to seek through kind of economic prosperity. Everything's kind of aligned. We just need to see that come through in the funding. So really it's making sure that we're all, when we're talking, for example, with central government, that we're having those conversations that actually we've got a really crystal clear plan here. We know exactly what we want to deliver. We just need the support and help from co-funding from government to kind of to get on with it really and deliver and get those benefits.
Thank you, Sonia. I just want to check that our partners are on board, completely, utterly on board.
Within have always, when I've been in this room involved in public transport, urged us to do PT Futures, do the pickup for PT Futures. So in that extent, that partner has been on board. I cannot speak for the other TAs, but our main partner is very supportive of where we need to go. Sorry to cut across you, Stuart.
Look, as Sonia articulated, if we think about Christchurch City, Waimakariri, District Council, Selwyn District Council, and NZTA are all part of Greater Christchurch Partnership. This program has been front and centre in their collective strategic discussions and thinking for nearly 10 years. And we talked just before about, let's have a crystal ball and look out 10 years from now. Well, we had that same conversation 10 years ago. And here we are continuing to try and make it happen. And I think this is the challenge, is we're all very, very aligned from a strategic perspective and an understanding of the why this is important for our city. Everyone is on the same page there. So what we need is to unlock the delivery. And to unlock the delivery, as Sonia said, we've got to go through this detailed investment case process to demonstrate the economic investment value, and that's a good thing. And so our target is to collectively bid for funding in the next funding round. Now, being a pragmatist, we think, well, it's unlikely we're going to get all the money we want. And so part of this 10-year program, as you'll hear, is building a delivery timeline or sort of chain of events in 3-year cycles. So every 3 years we can bid for the next bunch of money and the next bunch of money, etc. So that's kind of the thought process going in, and Christchurch City are in the same place from an infrastructure point of view. Selwyn and Waimakariri have got plans for their infrastructure needs and their growth needs feeding into this process. Yeah.
Make a quick comment in terms of, so not only have we got this strategic, just as kind of some assurance, and we do have some slides shortly, Christchurch City Council are currently doing an investment case for the infrastructure for Route 1 and 5. So they're currently working on that, and we're working in partnership. They're also working with us on our network review, because it's our network, and the 10-year programme for services, so that we can align those infrastructure changes, because that's where we get the benefits, and some of them we'd simply need bus stops and other things to kind of make these happen. Selwyn's also looking at the next stage of implementing their park and ride. And so essentially that's part of the business case we've put out. So that, again, it's that real collaborative partnership and working. And Waimakariri have got into the National Infrastructure Plan, the kind of Eastern Transport. So everybody, I guess, kind of everybody's trying to do their part to kind of make sure that we get that kind of co-funding and that we can really make significant progress in this space. So I think everybody's doing as much as they possibly can to kind of push it.
Okay, team, we might let the team carry on with the presentations, because I'm conscious of time. We've got 30 minutes left for this presentation, so maybe if we just park some questions in the meantime and save them to the end, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, kia ora. If we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So the customer meta-analysis is a piece of work that we undertook to review feedback from customers over the past 3 years. And we were looking specifically for comments around PT improvements that people were looking for. So we started with looking at our Metro customer service database. We get a lot of feedback through that channel, and as you can imagine, with having done a review for over 10 years, there's a lot of feedback from the community on a consistent basis about requests for improvements. So that database also captures feedback from communities as well. So anytime there's a community deputation to council, for example, there was one recently with the Yaldhurst community that you'll probably remember relatively recently, with requests for services to be improved for their area. We record that in the Metro feedback database. Then what we did is we looked at data from our regional public transport plan, from our LTP, from our annual plans, and also from the Metro customer service survey that we do on an annual basis, and pulled out all those relevant comments. And then we went out to our TA partners and asked them to submit to us any relevant PT related comments that we could use in this analysis. So we were quite particular about what we were looking for. We were looking for information that related to a specific route or a specific location. So we had that geospatial component to the data. So you can imagine that across 13 sources, there's quite a lot of data received about public transport, but there's also quite a lot of general comments that we receive around drivers and safety. There's a lot of comments that just say things like, we need more buses. So lots of support for us to progress the network as quickly as possible, those kinds of things. But we were looking for, in the context of this network review, we were looking for data that was really actionable. So if it had that element of a route and or a suburb or a town related to it, it was in, and if it didn't have that, it was excluded from this data set. So what we ended up with were about 2,900 comments that we were looking at. We did capture infrastructure, and we're sharing that information with our TA partners, but that's outside our remit. So when we analysed the data, we generally looked at that without the infrastructure component, unless it was a comment that had multiple themes. So when we looked at that data, we were able to sort it based on theme into these sort of key primary themes. So there's 6 primary themes that we were able to look at, and then we split those down a little bit further so that we could really get to the heart of what people are telling us. And then we were able to look at that data based on location and route to get a real sense of granularity around what people are asking us for. So this is a key piece of work that we're really looking to work on further with our partners. This is going to give us a really good look at longitudinal data as we continue to do that from a network perspective. So, we're really keen to see how we can use that as a tool with all of our partners and see the impacts of our improvements over time. Yep. So just at a very top level, you can see here, there's a lot of granular data that we have here, but just to give you a sense of how it shakes down from the primary theme perspective, we've got here all of the themes. So the key theme here is schedule. So schedule relates to add trips or make services more frequent, express services, start earlier or end later, and it's also got in there something else, timetable adjustments. So that's really about frequency though at the end of the day. So if you look at that from a subcategory perspective, you'll find that the vast majority of comments are actually about adding services or making trips more frequent. So just to look at the overcrowding section as well. So overcrowding is really related to schedule. It's basically a request to add more trips. We pulled that out from a data reporting perspective because under the RPTP, we've got the option of adding assist buses. So that category actually has reported overcrowding from the community split into student overcrowding and general overcrowding. But essentially, if you add those two categories together, you get about 50% of all comments is related to those schedule issues with a particular emphasis on frequency. So route requests is things like amend a route, extend a route, add a new route in, and it also contains reinstate discontinued services. Service performance is things like fixed reliability and delays, bunching, better connections, that kind of thing. And then infrastructure we'll just skip over. And then new PT services is really about requests for on-demand services, for example, or requests for small buses. So if we go to the next slide. So this one was really interesting. So one of the key insights that we took from this piece of work that we did is the really, really wide geographic spread of comments. It's very, very broad. So there are 128 suburbs or towns represented in this piece of data where there's a request for one improvement or another. You can see here what we've got is basically about 50% of the comments are represented by these 14 areas. So, and I should emphasise as well, so this is 2023 to 2025. And I guess what this also shows that there is an alignment in terms of the work that we have been doing to improve services in the past short period of time. So with respect to Rolleston, it's got twice as many comments as its nearest neighbour. So Hallswell, Lincoln and Darfield are about 5% of all the comments in total. And between those top four areas, that's about a third of all the comments. So there's a really long tail. This graph actually goes on underneath and extends to another 114 areas based on the number of comments. So it's a very, very long graph based on the number of comments. And you can see here how it breaks down into those primary themes. So there's not a lot of surprises here, I don't think. So with respect to Rolleston, you can see that the dark blue and the light blue lines are the primary issue. So we'd expect some mitigation there as we've implemented routes 84 and 85 with Bentley recently. What you'll see, though, too, is in terms of route requests, that's a reflection of the community's interest in extending services out to other parts of Rolleston where the housing has developed quite rapidly and the network doesn't have a bus stop, for example. Likewise, in Hallswell, we'd expect to see some improvement there based on the uplift to Route 7 to turn up and go. But the orange line also reflects the fact that the buses don't go out to those further developed areas. Lincoln will be improved by the additional service there, and the Route 80 and Darfield as well as a result of the annual plan last year, improvements to the assist bus that was put on from West Melton. But you'll notice there the orange bar again, and that's reflective of that community desire through the annual plan to have a service through from Rolleston to Darfield. One of the key things to point out here as well is Leaston. So as I said earlier, the orange route component includes reinstate a discontinued service. So we need to also note that this is about advocacy for services as well, and it doesn't necessarily always result in patronage. So we did have that service in Leaston, and unfortunately over the trial period it was implemented at the same time as Darfield, but it did not meet its patronage goals that were set with the community initially, and it was subsequently discontinued. Do you want to? Okay, so let's have a look at the next one. So these are the key themes. This is really, really high level. So what we understand is that frequency is the key driver to customer requests. So frequency is a key aspect of driving reliability for people on the network. Frequency means that there's less likelihood that you'll be left behind, that another bus will come quite quickly, and that if you are riding on the motorway and you can get a seat, that it's a safer journey, for example, with those inter-district travel. Directness and express services is one of the other things that we're hearing from people, and primarily in that area, it's about inter-district travel between Lincoln, Rolleston, and Rangiora and Christchurch City. But it's also, as we noted, make routes more direct. That's a key aspect as well. So there is commentary in there about some of the routes taking a long time to get to a final destination because they're winding around neighbourhoods. So there's requests in there to straighten up those routes. And adding express links. So service performance is a really obvious one, and in there you would expect to see comments around the orbiter, for example, bunching, Route 44, which you saw last week. And then the other thing that's a theme is linking better connections and also that bus ferry alignment. And then there's a really clear indication of where those coverage gaps are. So Preston's, Hallswell, Yaldhurst, for example. That's a lot of that we're hearing from the outer rural townships and the hillside suburbs, for example. So that's all really aligned as well, I guess, with our PT Futures program. So it's good to see there is that alignment there in terms of what's coming through from our customers. Yeah.
So look, this is a really, really good piece of work that the team have done to help us shape our engagement with the community, to sort of really refine our thinking and our planning on network design. One of the things that we talked about earlier today was getting this balance between community advocacy and evidence, because ultimately building an investment case, it ultimately needs to stack up with evidence. And while you have seen on that previous graph a lot of advocacy from Selwyn, but as Stephanie said, if you go all the way down 128 odd suburbs, just about every suburb in Greater Christchurch is represented, but with differing degrees of advocacy. That advocacy does not necessarily mean that those suburbs deserve or don't deserve a PT service. So one of the things we have to do is take this community feedback as one of many inputs into our network planning approach. And an example here that Stephanie talked about is a lot of feedback around windy routes. Ironically, windy routes tick the coverage box, but they don't tick the amenity or patronage box. And we know this from our real data from our existing network. We know that the windy routes are poorly patronised. We know that low frequency is poorly patronised because it doesn't have the amenity that people are expecting. So we have to factor those facts and that evidence into our thinking as well. And inevitably what will come out is answers that we probably haven't anticipated yet, but that will create conversation because some parts of our community might feel they're missing out based on a network design, but we're trying to balance aspiration with evidence to produce a case that will stack up for funding.
Limited funding.
Yeah.
So it's all leading up to this point. So far, we've identified strategic alignment, technical grounds. The programme needs to be refreshed. And as Steph has talked about, those key messages coming from the communities, and as Stuart says, how we interpret them. So now, using all this information, bringing it all together, we do have a strong platform to build on. But as we're about to discuss, and as Stuart's alluded to, there are challenges facing our resources and delivery that we intend to overcome through smart working together and through innovation. We now need a detailed plan for the next 3 years and to update the indicative plan for 10 years as we move towards a mass rapid transit horizon. I'm conscious of time,
Yes,
and we need to get to a conversation point. So if you'll forgive me, I might try and very quickly move through the next few slides. So looking ahead, it's good to reflect on what's been achieved. I won't spend too much time on these, but we have made some fantastic progress, all things considered. And we've talked a lot about staging and the importance of that. And the importance of staging means the right investment in the right place at the right time in order to capture opportunities and grow the system. And once we're growing the system, that grows our capacity to invest more in parts of the network where, frankly, we're not going to get much income, right? So that's part of what this is about. So we have foundations, rest of network, mass rapid transit. That's something that's carried over from PT Futures and is unlikely to change substantially. So what we will be seeing is, yes, an initial focus and investment on the foundation stage. So that will be chasing growth, frequency of core routes, but we are also concerned to ensure that we cover coverage as well. And we're going to move to a conversation very shortly where we can talk about trade-offs and how we're going to manage them. And this is really the program that puts the... Oh,
I've broken it.
you've broken.
Sorry.
Let's have a look.
I didn't do anything.
It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah, that was it. It's like, that's it, you're out. Yeah.
Yeah, I could keep going because the next slide that was coming up was really putting that stages into a time frame. So it really shows the emphasis on the next 6 or 7 years being on initial investment on core routes, but then bringing in that coverage model as well. So that's about creating more financial headway to deliver more coverage. And both of these things work together to unlock MRT in the middle of the next decade. So a lot of our staging will be focused. Here we go. It's always better to see, isn't it, rather than me trying to describe it. So yeah, those foundations, rested network, all leading towards mass rapid transit. It'll be a very coordinated pathway of investment that'll put the right money in the right place to grow our system and make it as good as it can be for as many people as we can serve. 33, yes. So some of the work we're already doing, this includes some of the work that's underway now. So routes 1 and 5, turn up and go investment case, we're working on that right now. And there's also monitoring and review of Route 7 underway. NZTA completing their work on Horswell Road. Lincoln Road gets underway soon. We'll have 7 kilometres of uninterrupted bus lanes on Horswell Road. We've got turn up and go services, which early indications are performing very well from a patronage growth perspective. We're also, I'll move quickly, yeah, we're also working in Selwyn and Waimakariri as well. We've got the Route 8485 direct service, which will be under review soon. And we're working at Waimakariri, particularly on the post-Wood End bypass opportunities. And that leads nicely into our 10-year programme, which will start, as I said, with a 2730 detailed investment case where we will really be trying to align all of the things we're talking about today. So really responding to the priorities we're hearing from the community, aligning a strategy that works with all our policies, and yeah, ticking all the boxes. That'll be 27 to 30, and we look forward to bringing that to you. And ultimately, we'll be working towards 3 shortlisted network options to test the community's willingness to pay. And this is something we're going to spend a lot of time over the next 18 months working out together. And I think I might hand over to Steph just to talk quickly through and then we'll have a conversation around trade-offs.
Okay, so the meta-analysis is really driving the initial conversations with the community, and the emphasis here is that we're going out really early to have those conversations with the community so that they can have input into those 3 options that are going to be built. So what we're doing right now is engaging with our council partners. We work really closely with the transport teams and the comms and engagement teams at our TA partners, looking for opportunities for aligned messaging, looking at what they've got going on in the community at the moment, and looking to work with them and get the message out through their channels. They're really connected directly into the community, so we're really looking to work quite closely with them. March and April will see us doing pre-engagement with key stakeholders. So that looks like going out to our reference group members, for example. We work really closely with organisations that represent specific communities out in Greater Otatahi who have a particular interest in public transport. So we'll be engaging with those PT reference groups, including the accessibility reference group. We also work quite closely with the reference groups at the other TAs as well. And then the next part of that is stakeholder workshops. So we would be looking to gather together key stakeholders who do, again, represent communities out in the Greater Otatahi area. And we'd be looking to discuss in a bit more detail perhaps some of those issues around trade-offs, equity in the community and how that impacts decision-making. Just looking to get a bit more detail from them into some of those particular issues. And then May and June is the wider public consultation process. So that's when we would be out in the community. We would have the online survey up and running, and we would have a program of engagement activities. And then, as Mark said, the final piece of the puzzle is going out in the draft LTP to get people's local share of funding through targeted rates based on whatever their preferred network option is. But that will be a network option that the community's feedback will be reflected in. So if we go to the next one. So we're really keen to work alongside you to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to give their feedback. We know that you have really deep ties into the community. So this is just a really quick overview of some of the engagement planning that we're expecting to do, and we will come back to you with a more detailed plan in our April update. I guess we're really keen to understand from you what activities you might be planning during that period of engagement and give you a high-level idea of what we've done in the past and the sort of things that you can expect. So, as I said, key stakeholder workshops, we're quite keen to pass that invitation list over to you to make sure that we've captured everybody who should be in those workshops and get your feedback. We would expect that to happen probably, we'd like to get invitations out probably around mid-March for workshops in the middle of April. You could expect to see a campaign similar to what you might, we use similar tactics to what you might see in an LTP or an annual plan, and we do expect lots and lots of engagement on this particular piece of work. Our communities are really, really interested in contributing to this mahi. So targeted social media, advertisements, a digital campaign that we're working on with our brand and digital team right now. We'll have a full schedule of engagement events, and we'll be sharing that calendar with you so that it would be amazing to have you come to any of those events. It's always really appreciated by the community when there's a counsellor available to have a conversation with. One of the things that happens in previous consultations is that we know that you'll be working directly with community groups, for example, and be invited to their meetings. So we can support that by giving you collateral, FAQs, and we understand that there's quite a few awareness gaps around a whole bunch of topics when it comes to public transport. So we're really looking to provide you with some really robust FAQs that support conversations around why there aren't trains, why we don't have smaller buses, how network planning works, how the funding works, how targeted rates contribute. So we'll be looking to really support you with that information. And we often give a PowerPoint presentation as well. That's just a really straightforward one that you can just take all that, package it up and go out and talk to your communities. If you need staff support for those sorts of things, we are potentially available just depending on capacity. So we will be doing things like pop-ups at the bus interchange. They're always really effective. We're keen to hear from you about any specific events in your ward that you think would be worthwhile for us to attend to contribute to that events calendar, and looking at how we can build media opportunities. So we'd really be interested in hearing from you about what you'd like to hear, what you'd like from us in terms of supporting your community conversations. If there's any suggestions that you have.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I was just going to make a quick comment because you'll realise from yesterday's conversation that this is aligning with the annual plan. And so it's really important because the korero with the kapa that we're sort of calling the hearings that we're not doing for the annual plan because we're doing engagement, that opportunity for people to come in and talk to you is going to align with this May period. And these stakeholder conversations are going to be leading into that. So it's important for councillors, as Stephanie said, to get that background information as to what is an annual plan PT conversation and what is a PT futures improvements conversation. So we'll make sure that you've got that. The teams are working together to make sure we're being clear for you.
Actually, I could just mention as well, one of the things we did talk about was getting a project page up quite early in the piece, probably around April, just to give some of that background. So when you're having those community conversations, you've got a place where you can send people and it'll just give them the basics about what the engagement looks like, how people can have their say, and it'll give some of that background information as well to support those conversations.
Right. We've got about 8 questions and we've got 5 minutes. So, Councillor Lamont.
Very quick, and we can just take this offline. Really interested in the Stuart. You mentioned the macro business case. To the building the investment case, that algorithm. I'm just a numbers geek, and I'm really interested in knowing how that's built up and how sophisticated that is at the moment. Is it just gathering bits and pieces, or have you built sort of an algorithm, and what bits feed into that? The trade-offs, the environment, the need, the spatial plan, the community engagement, they are all important pieces. I, in my life, work at the macro end and want to help as much as I can at that end. So offline, if you can just feed me some of that thinking, that would be...
Offline, I can facilitate that, absolutely.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you for that. Really good presentation. It takes me back to, I do a lot of sort of travel to Africa and that, and one of the things I've noticed over there is that public transport is a high patronage, and they use smaller buses, and there's people inside, outside, on top, and it's actually fantastic. And I don't want us to go there, but the question is, in the case study, are we working within a box and confined, or is there a whole lot of entrepreneurial, innovative sort of solutions being looked at?
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, we're absolutely looking for innovation. So we've gone out, as you know, we've agreed to do a business case. We're getting consultants to come in to support us. So we've obviously got subject matter experts, and we're going to kind of consolidate the team with consultants. So we're just working through that process at the moment. We hope to have them in March. One of the things we've asked for as well, and one of the things we're looking at, is kind of more innovative ideas. So we've got the hybrid model with only New Zealand kind of private public partnership at the moment. So we've already, and On Demand was the first in New Zealand to become a permanent service. We're really looking for innovative ways and alternative models that we can kind of help service and kind of help improve our network. So that's a key part of this programme.
Councillor Mackay, quickly.
Well, quickly, I've got a couple of questions. In that timeline thing, you've got the foundations and the rest of the network. Are you doing a combination? Are we touching on both during the community engagement?
Yeah, it's all concurrent, and essentially we're talking about the network in its total. So we wouldn't necessarily talk in that language with the community. Yeah.
Well, the community, I'm going to community board meeting on Tuesday night, definitely wants to know what's happening. So I'm quite keen to get any information that you can give me now to take to them on Tuesday night. I have a couple of questions, and I think it was Stuart talked about, well, PT is a low income service. So that means that a lot of the funding actually falls to ratepayers that are potentially non-users. And while we might have 30% of the area that have hopped on the bus once, and I would suspect that quite a number of them are multiple members of the same family. So key stakeholders, how do we actually get the views from the ratepayers who pay substantial amount? Because I think it's very easy to get the views from a user, and they will be quite biased with a low cost service, because I think they do get a pretty good deal on fares. And I guess it touches a little bit into Nettle's thinking about that economics thing, where does the private ratio fit in? So yeah, my real concern is, and we've had an example that's come to light relatively recently around a project that we did around not talking to the wide community. So how do we get that ratepayer voice? So just making sure that you can come back to us thinking about that.
Okay, two more questions, and then we'll have to make that do. Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Davis.
Okay, mine is more a comment, and going back to Nick's comment about buses not being cool, as somebody who lived on Auckland's North Shore for 16 years, I can tell you that they become very cool when they're the quickest and easiest way to get somewhere. So I lived on Onua Road, which the people here will know, and in rush hour, it would take 2 hours to get into the city by car. It would take 20 minutes by bus. So buses were very cool. I also watched the Northern Busway being built as I was driving along the motorway and thought, nobody will ever use that. It's now at capacity and they can't accept all the passengers who need it. And finally, from where I live now, for young people, buses, scooters and bikes are the way they travel because they can't afford cars.
Councillor Davis, very quickly.
Yeah, my question's on that young people question. Because I come from New York and commuters are miserable people. I mean, like, really, do we really want our kids to be sitting on a bus or train from Rangiora for an hour each way? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. And when we ask these questions, something like a city bike, e-bike input into this, is that part of this business case? And we ask the people, particularly the young people, if you had the choice of an electric bike or a bus, which would you take?
Yeah, so part of the case will look at why people choose to use public transport and some of the constraints around that. I'm also interested in the role micro-mobility has to play in terms of being able to access public transport. And obviously we don't want our commuters to be miserable people, so we'll be looking at ways to make the system as customer-centric as possible and provide those kind of journey time equivalents we were just talking about on Onua Road, where we'll have PT as the fastest way to get around. So hopefully we'll have very happy passengers. That is, customer centricity is at the heart of what we're looking at. And we'll look at things like micro mobility as because obviously that can extend catchments. For example, you can go further than you can walk. So there's a lot to think about. It's all part of it. It's all part of. That's why we have this elaborate investment case process where we can make sense of all this information in a very coherent way. So I hope that answers your question.
I just want to make sure that electric biking is part of PT. It's a mode. It's public. It's probably a private company, right? But no one really makes a lot of money on public transportation, right? So it's greater good. But we do need to provide all the different parts.
So we do work quite closely with the travel demand team at Christchurch City Council, for example, and we also have one of the micro-mobility suppliers on our public transport stakeholder reference group, so we do get those views as well. Yeah.
Okay, team, we're going to have to wind it up there. Sorry, if any councillors have got any more questions, I'm sure that the staff here would really appreciate your feedback and any more feedback going forward. I'd thank you for coming in today, staff, and talking about public transport's improvements and the program potentially from 27 to 37. I mean, this has been a really, really interesting discussion, and I think we probably could have carried on for another half an hour, but I think I thank all the councillors for your good questions and your enthusiasm. So I think the conversation started, and let's carry it on, because I think this is quite an exciting space, and maybe one day we'll even get a 315 to Twizel. Yeah. So thank you, team. We're going to have to wind it up there. Everyone can have 30 seconds to stretch your legs.